Here's John Shannon, the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia, the executive producer, former of Hockey Night in Canada, show 100% Hockey with Darren Millard, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And John, we start with heavy hearts today because I know you were great friends with Greg Millen and also someone who, at several points in Greg's life, hired him to call games. A thought or two about Greg.
Hey, this has been a tough 24 hours since we got the news about Greg's passing yesterday morning. Yeah, I hired Greg. In fact, I hired Greg 4 times in our careers. I hired him to do the Olympics in 1994 in Lillehammer, Norway, which in my mind is still viewed as the greatest Olympics ever for the setting that it was in. Hired him twice at Hockey Night in Canada, and hired him to be the face of Leafs TV for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment in, I think, 2002. So we got to work together there as well. You know, he was he had a great sense of humor. He was a great practical joker. It didn't necessarily come across on the air, but nobody liked to play tricks on people more than Greg Millen. I am actually quite amazed, and Greg would be embarrassed today with the amount of notice that this has taken and the impact that he's made. Last night on the Amazon show, dedicating the show to him, the Winnipeg Jets doing the same in the arena. Ryan Huska, after the game last night in San Jose, Michael Backlund stopping the Flames team on the charter back down to Anaheim to raise a toast to Greg Millen. You know, he touched people so many different ways that I don't think any of us knew. He was a very private person that way. And if you had Greg's confidence, he was not one to gossip. He was one to confide in you. And he was a great friend. And by the way, he was a really, really good broadcaster for a long time. And the last 2 or 3 years, guys, I will tell you right now, whoever made the decision to put him into the Calgary package of regional games deserves some credit because it reinvigorated him. It reinvigorated his career. And in the last 6 or 8 months, I've never seen Greg happier about being a broadcaster than he was doing his Flames games.
Well, yeah, and yesterday Sportsnet did not do a Flames regional broadcast as a tribute and testimony to Greg. They took the San Jose side of things, and you talk about him and his career. He was the original Ottawa Senators color guy. He did Toronto Maple Leafs color, or more recently the Calgary Flames. He was at one point a staple on Hockey Night out of Montreal doing Habs games. And John, you hired him to do effectively a lot of Canucks games as the second game of the Hockey Night doubleheader when Hockey Night went to a second game on Saturday nights. Tell us that story.
Well, so yeah, it was, we had our young gun play-by-play guy was Chris Cuthbert. So
young gun,
yeah, he was our young gun, and and Scott Russell was our Western host, and for a period of time, our guy to do color in the West was Greg Millen, and so in the mid '90s, Greg and Chris and Scott became the go-to guy on the doubleheader. Did a lot of games in Vancouver, all over the West. Did a lot of playoff games in the Western Conference. You know, we had Bob and Harry do the East, and then Greg and Chris and Scott, and both Scotts, in fact, when Scott Russell left, Scott Oak came on board. They would do the West game. So it's funny. I always, as you know, I'm very proud to be from British Columbia, and I would talk to my mother every once in a while about the show. What did you think? Did you like the game? Did you like the announcers? And she would always say, whatever you do, don't change my voice. And Greg was one of those guys. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, John.
I can tell you this story about Greg when he started doing Ottawa Senators games, and it was some time in. I was working at the local paper there, and he would get a pretty rough ride on sports radio as being a Toronto guy this, a Toronto guy that. And at one point, I wrote a story about all of it, and the next thing I know, I get a call from one of the Senators beat guy, one of my colleagues, who said, "Hey, Greg Millen wants your number and wants to call you." And I said, "Oh, okay, sure." And sure enough, the phone rang a few minutes later at my desk, and it was Greg Millen, and he just wanted to say, Matt, thank you very much. I read your story, really appreciate it, and it's nice of someone in this market to stand up for me. So I can testify to Greg's classiness, and you're quite right, John. He was a remarkable broadcaster and a terrific fellow, and the hockey world is poor for his loss.
The one thing that I don't think even some of his best friends would understand is that in the end, he had friends everywhere. Ron Francis, when Ron Francis, as an 18-year-old, got traded to Hartford, he lived with Greg and Ann Millen his first time around. Kyle Dubas was the general manager in Sault Ste. Marie. Greg knew of Sheldon Keefe as a coach in Pembroke. Sheldon and Kyle met for the first time ever in Greg Millen's living room. And what then happened was that, and Sheldon had been through some tough times, obviously, as a junior player and early on in his coaching career. And that meeting then led to Sheldon being hired by Kyle in Sault Ste. Marie, and then obviously in Toronto to coach the Maple Leafs. So Greg did a lot of this stuff behind the scenes. Friends in Winnipeg, friends in Calgary, friends, obviously tons of friends still in St. Louis. He drove every day as a player to practice with Brian Sutter and Bernie Federko. Would sit in the back seat and poke both of them and tease them both, and was a great teammate. So he was a great friend. We traveled together. We went on golf trips together. I last texted with him Sunday night at 8:00. He went into hospital a few hours later and passed away early Monday morning.
He was also a member of the Peterborough Petes back when.
Yes. Well, he loved Roger too. He loved Roger Nielsen.
Roger Nielsen. I was just going to say when that Peterborough program was really humming.
He was no slouch as a goalie, guys. 14 years.
No, exactly. He played 14 years.
14 years in the NHL. Yeah, I mean, as I said, just that's a fabulous career to carve out. As we make a bit of a pivot, I'll segue by saying this.
Just one last thing. He played with Keith Acton and Doug Jarvis in Peterborough, so former Canucks assistant, and I can remember the conversations and the relationship he had with Acton when Acton was assistant to Pat Quinn with the Leafs, and Greg was doing a lot of those games.
I'd be interested to hear what Greg Millen would say is the greatest goal scorer of all time. He was, I don't have the stats in front of me. I'm going to guess that Greg gave up a few to Wayne Gretzky over his tenure because
let's remember he was
paralleled.
He was
Who
a
did
teammate.
it? Yes.
They played together in Sault Ste. Marie.
Back then? Okay, yeah.
They played together as when Greg had already been drafted by Pittsburgh, but then ended up going to Sault Ste. Marie to play with 16-year-old Wayne Gretzky. So
wow, crazy.
So he was he would be terribly embarrassed today, terribly embarrassed with us making all this fuss about him. We every once in a while, if you did a Hartford game when they were in the league, or you did a St. Louis game and you wanted to show a hockey card of Greg Millen, he hated it. He hated it. He didn't want it to be about him. He wanted it to be about the game. And he would get mad at the producer for showing it. Or he would get mad at the producer for, why are you putting this on camera? I want to talk about the players. I don't want to talk about me. So he was a consummate professional in so many ways.
History this week in the National Hockey League with Alex Ovechkin And the debate rages on, much as when LeBron started to pile up a lot of his hardware and records as well. How do you compare LeBron versus Michael Jordan? How do you compare Alex Ovechkin versus Wayne Gretzky, John?
Well, I think when you talk about the greatest goal scorer, it has to be Alex Ovechkin. When you talk about the greatest player, if it's just those two in the category, you have to talk about Wayne Gretzky. So I think there's room for both. I really do. I think that there's room to tell everybody that nobody has scored as consistently and for a length of period of time than Ovechkin has. I think there are a lot of us that never thought he'd catch Wayne, but the fact at the age of 39 that he's got 42 goals is remarkable. But if you look back at his statistics, all those years of 50s and 40s and 60s, you know, his lowest year of goal scoring was 24 goals. With a giant asterisk beside it, it was only a 48-game schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what makes Ovechkin's feat of 895 and soon to be 900, I would imagine. So amazing. But as far as greatest player, I think that's a different category. And I think then you put Gretzky or Lemieux, Howe, Crosby in that category, as opposed to the greatest goal scorer being Ovechkin.
He's 49 behind Gretzky for overall goals, regular season and playoffs. Anything leads you to believe he won't get there? 49
playoff goals is a lot of goals.
No. 49 any goals. It could be any. This is combined goals in one's career. So he could feast next year with a good playoff run. Might get there that way.
Yeah.
Might just fall short. So he might need to stick around for 2 more years for that one to go down.
And nothing would surprise me now of him sticking around for a couple more years.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Great. He's an amazing athlete. Give him credit. He's an amazing athlete. And I tell you what, I was a naysayer for years. I truly was. I was a naysayer. I thought he was too selfish. I thought that the Caps would never win if he was the leader. And time again, the stories that we have been told, obviously during this run, and others that have come up to me and told me stories behind the scenes, is that this guy has truly learned how to be a great leader. He learned how to be a great teammate. And it has now paralleled what he has done as an athlete.
Well, so, John, there was some concern.
You have to give him credit for that.
There was some concern that the preoccupation with feeding Ovechkin to get these goals was going to side rail. They were not expected to be that good of a team anyway. And many thought that their preoccupation with this record would really derail this Capital season. And in the end, it might have floated the season. Like, who'd have thought that their preoccupation and their focus on giving him the puck, that's led to all this success?
Well, they have lost 5 of their last 7. And in getting to this, to this point. But that's, I think the nice thing about it now is that it is behind all of us, and I think that there'll be a relaxed Alex Ovechkin and a much more relaxed Washington Capital Club as they, try to clinch the Metro against Carolina Thursday night, as they try to still race for the President's Trophy, and then prepare for the playoffs. And I think there's a real belief in Washington, and talking to Spencer Carberry, I think there's a real belief that they want this to be not just a memorable year of Ovechkin. They want this to be a memorable year for the Capitals, and that has to come with playoff success, and we'll see what that happens.
Mount Rushmores are always pretty personal, but if you're telling me that Ovechkin's going to play a couple of more years, then I think there very well could be a world where he is legitimately on an objective Mount Rushmore of NHL stars when it's all said and done.
It's hard to argue from that perspective. But, it also, I think it speaks to the depth and breadth of the great players that we have had in our league, in the game that we love so much. And it's fascinating, guys, in reading since Saturday and reading articles from non-traditional hockey people that follow the NBA, people that follow the NFL and Major League Baseball. There's a jealousy. We don't get this very often from other sports. There's a jealousy that we have the ability in hockey to celebrate success and respect history at the same time. Wayne Gretzky deserves credit for doing that, wearing the number 9 lapel button on Sunday, talking about Mr. Torrey and Mr. Arthur as he did at the beginning of the speech. And I just think that there's a reverence in our game that I haven't, that I think some of us have taken for granted for years because we love the game so much. But it's a reverence that seems to have been reborn with what we've seen with the race to 895.
John, I want to switch gears here and talk about playoff format. And look, the commissioner was quite clear at the recent owners' meetings that he is a fan of the divisional playoff alignment. And so that seems like it's here to stay. Look, 3 of the past 6 races, so over the last 3 years, Eastern and Western Conference races, have been separated at the end of the day by more than 2 points, more than a single game. In fact, a few years ago in the East, it was a 16-point gap between the wildcard team and the first team that missed out. It's been a lot closer, including last year when Washington and Detroit tied and Washington went on tiebreakers. You look at this year, Calgary, I suppose, could still stay close here with Minnesota. And, of course, Detroit has to win tonight against Montreal to keep that thing close. Do you think there's any appetite for 3-2-1? I know theoretically that could, create larger separation. But it would reward teams, and of course the possibility for 3-point wins to come back from a chase pack. Do you think there's any appetite? Do you think there is any merit to a 3-2-1 point system?
Well, first of all, I haven't done many studies on it, so I don't know the merit. I don't think there's much appetite to it. Simply because I think that what has been created is working. I don't recall a 20-game run in the regular season since Four Nations. I don't recall one as competitive as what we've seen in the NHL right now. It speaks to people saying, we need a play-in tournament. And I think the answer is we don't need a play-in tournament. We just need months of March and early April like we've seen. That, and I can just envision Gary sitting at his desk in New York saying, boys, you see, we're patient. This is how it's supposed to be. The schedule maker does his job, puts the right games on the right day, and make sure you have divisional games at a certain time of year. Then you have this opportunity. The competitive nature of what we have is working. The tightness of that race, the wild cards in the East and West, in this 3-point system that we have now, not the 3-2-1, the 3-point system right now, is working. What I don't think you want is you don't want the disparity of number 1 versus number 16 or 1 versus 8 in each conference being that different. It should be
noted this year there would be no change. Absolutely no change in the 3-point system versus
the Washington Capitals would have how many points and the Montreal Canadiens would have how many points?
Washington would have 149 points. The Montreal Canadiens would have 113 points, narrowly beating out the New York Rangers. Yeah.
So if there's going to be no change, why change?
Yeah.
Well,
And
here's why.
this is a very conservative league that way.
Yeah, no, I know. So here's why, and you would have a better grasp on this, given the amount of Oilers games you do, and given how often you're in the Alberta capital. But we are heading towards a fourth straight Oilers Kings first round. It went from a 7-game Oilers win to a 6-game Oilers win to a 5-game Oilers win. And if the Oilers win again this year, is that really enculturing rivalries, or is that been there, done that, seen the movie, don't need to tune in again?
Well, I think that there's still a few people, not necessarily at the league office, but even amongst the 30 teams, that think regional rivalries are important. Regional rivalries are successful. In fact, people are saying, how come we're only playing 3 games against teams in our own division? We need more of that. So you're going to get that when you get these consistent, and that's the understatement, these consistent playoff matchups of the same teams. That's the luck of the draw. I don't think there's really that situation in any other part of the 16 teams making the playoffs. And you're right, we're still not set. Yeah, Detroit has a chance. Calgary might have a better chance still. They play Minnesota once more as well, which will be fascinating. But I think Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek may be back for the Wild at that point. So
two different issues though, right? Standings and playoff format.
Yes,
change one without changing the other.
Yeah. And for the record, I actually support this playoff format for the regional rivalry element that you talked about, and that the league would talk about, John. Like, I think we need more of Vancouver, Calgary, more of Vancouver.
Slaying the Dragon,
Edmonton
felt good because it was 3 in a row.
Well, and that one was out of conference, but those are so rare.
Yeah,
you're far, far more likely to build up those rivalries in division.
But let's face it, if the Canucks were better this year if they were as anticipated we thought they would be, we might be licking our chops at another Edmonton Vancouver series and saying, look, isn't it the best? I'm not 4 years in a row the same matchup. Yeah, people may roll their eyes and it's a bit of an issue. But I'll tell you what, once they drop the puck in game 1, Edmonton, LA is going to be a hell of a series anyway, and no matter what happens. So,
also, especially
look what St. Louis has done. Look what St. Louis has done to the West.
Well,
and it's going to be exciting. Really
Edmonton, LA, especially if Quentin Byfield scores goals like he scored last night. I'm not sure I've seen a better display of hand-eye coordination on a hockey rink.
If you're an upset Oiler fan, guess what? Be better. Win the division, and you would have shaken free from the Los Angeles Kings. You weren't better. You're stuck in the
I think it
middle.
would be upset Kings fans.
Yeah, maybe that too.
A fourth straight time.
I would just, you're hang on, Blake. If you don't like it, play better and win. And suck it up and enjoy it for what is. By the way, let's just hope all these teams, because everybody right now seems to be running into a raft of injuries. Let's just hope everybody's healthy for the playoffs.
John, we're out of time. We'll let you go. Very difficult day, so appreciate you coming on here today, sir, and being as honest as you were with us.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
No, I will miss a day with you boys. You know that.